Let's break down Spider-Man Brand New Day, the fourth film in Tom Holland's run and the start of a new trilogy for Peter Parker, now helmed by Destin Daniel Cretton taking over from John Watts. We'll cover what happens in the film, the comic book history behind it, the ending, and where it leaves things off heading into the rest of the MCU. The film opens 9 months after No Way Home, in a New York City that no longer remembers Spider-Man's true identity. At the end of the previous film, Peter asked Doctor Strange to erase all memory of him from everyone's minds, including MJ and Ned. Brand New Day picks up with Peter making his own way in the world as a result of that choice. Peter has written a letter to MJ, hoping that somewhere deep down she still remembers loving him, but he chooses not to contact her, worried about the danger his life puts her in. This gives him the chance, for the first time, to simply be Spider-Man without the complications of Peter Parker's personal life. But the isolation takes a toll. He's beloved by the city, but no one can actually know who he is. To cope, Peter has built an AI companion, which the filmmakers have described as the closest thing he's had to a friend in years. He still holds on to pieces of his old life, a Lego figure, MJ's old coffee cup, checking in on his old friends' social media. He's miserable, even if he takes some comfort in knowing that MJ and Ned are happy. This new setting strips away a lot of the Iron Boy Jr. trappings of the earlier Holland films. No Stark tech, no money, no gadgets handed to him. Peter builds his own equipment from scratch, which fits a version of the character who's more self-reliant. Holland's suit in this film also takes clear inspiration from Andrew Garfield's amazing Spider-Man suit, and it's a more practical, tangible design than the fully CGI suits Marvel has leaned on before. The 4-year time jump in the story is loaded with callbacks to iconic Spider-Man comic covers. These include Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man's debut issue, along with Amazing Spider-Man 134, Amazing Spider-Man 345, and nods to Amazing Spider-Man 318. The Evolutionary War covers, New Avengers 27 with the Hand, and imagery referencing the Punisher and Scorpion. Longtime readers will recognize a lot of these visual references throughout the film's action sequences. During the time jump, Peter spots Ned in a convenience store and follows him to a party, where he reconnects with MJ for the first time since the memory spell. Ned has spent the years since searching for Spider-Man's identity, building a suspect board that includes Flash Thompson and their old teacher Mr. Harrington, and developing an app called the Spidey Tracker to help locate him. That tracker becomes a major plot device later in the film, especially in the ending and post-credits scene. MJ, however, has moved on and is now with a new love interest, drawing loosely on a character from the comics era of the actual Brand New Day storyline. Seeing them together spikes Peter's anxiety, and when he returns home that night, he has a breakdown and wakes up to find he's mutated further, his apartment covered in webbing. This is the clearest sign yet that he's becoming more spider than human. This mutation is the core of the film's plot, which is fundamentally about suppression, government overreach, and the consequences of power without control. The film's central antagonist is revealed to be Sadie Sink playing Jean Grey. This is arguably the darkest live-action introduction Jean Grey has ever had, clearly laying groundwork for a future Dark Phoenix arc. Like Peter, Jean is defined by isolation. She hasn't yet connected with the X-Men or Professor Xavier, and without anyone guiding her, she's been left to fend for herself, hunted by Damage Control, who can't control her powers. She's shown to be able to possess people and jump between bodies, as well as freeze people in place with a psychic blast, abilities drawn directly from her portrayals in the comics and X-Men animated series. Jean spends much of the film attacking Damage Control facilities, including driving an explosive-laden truck into one of their sites and freeing Scorpion in the process. Because Peter is immune to her psychic possession, Damage Control brings him in to help contain her. This puts him face-to-face with the head of Damage Control, Bill Stryker, an X-Men comics villain who led an anti-mutant militia and ran a propaganda campaign demonizing mutants in the source material. The film also introduces Detective Jean DeWolf, taken directly from the comics. Over the course of the movie, Peter learns Jean had a sister, Sarah, who was also psychic and by most signs even more powerful than Jean. Sarah's death is what triggers Jean's mutation in this version of the story, mirroring different takes on her comic book origin, where trauma over her sister's death led to Professor Xavier taking her in as his first student. In the film, Sarah was captured and experimented on by Stryker in an attempt to map her brainwaves and replicate her abilities. Before dying, she sent out a psychic message reading VMAX, which Jean has been trying to decode, and which Peter ends up investigating as well, with help from Yelena Belova. Brand New Day itself borrows its title and some thematic DNA from a real comic book arc that served as a soft reboot for the character following the fallout of Civil War. In the comics, Peter's support of the Superhero Registration Act, followed by his identity being exposed, put his loved ones in direct danger, including Aunt May being shot. To save her, Peter made a deal with the demon Mephisto, trading away his marriage to MJ and asking that the world forget he was Spider-Man. Though people still remembered Peter Parker existed, it gave him and the franchise a brand new day to build from. The MCU version isn't a direct adaptation, but the through line, public and personal identity colliding, and a wipe used to protect the people he loves, echoes that comic arc, including new supporting characters and a back-to-basics take on Peter's life. As Peter's mutation escalates throughout the film, gaining organic webbing and increased strength, it plays into the same themes explored through Bruce Banner, who appears as a professor at Empire State University still using an inhibitor device to keep the Hulk suppressed. Peter turns to him for help building his own inhibitor to control his mutation. After some setbacks and help from MJ, he finally succeeds. Jean, meanwhile, threatens MJ to pressure Peter, prompting him to bring her to Frank Castle, the Punisher, for protection, tying back to Castle and Matt Murdock's prior MCU appearances and further fleshing out New York's street-level heroes. On the way, Jean possesses MJ, uses the opportunity to probe Peter's feelings, and ultimately throws her off a building. Jean later takes Bruce Banner to Damage Control's headquarters to try to break into their vault again. Frank Castle, urged on by MJ, goes to help, leading to a confrontation with a version of Hulk. During this fight, Banner loses control while possessed, and the more feral, savage Hulk persona emerges, a shift back from the more restrained, smart Hulk portrayal from Endgame. Peter also uses the Shocker gauntlets recovered from Homecoming during the battle. Eventually, Peter helps subdue Jean, who utters her sister Sarah's name before passing out. Stryker lies to Peter about who Sarah was, but the truth comes out later. When Peter returns to MJ, she's discovered the letters he wrote at the start of the film and confronts him directly, telling him she doesn't love him because she has no memory of their relationship. To her, Peter is a stranger hiding behind a mask. It raises the central question of the film: can Peter still be Peter, or has the mask become his true identity? MJ still invites him in to meet Ned, and the moment centers Peter's internal conflict, whether to try to rebuild what they had or remain isolated, known only as Spider-Man. During this reunion, MJ describes what it felt like when Jean possessed her, and Peter realizes Stryker lied to him about Sarah. He heads to Damage Control's Roosevelt Island headquarters to investigate. It's revealed that VMAX was the word Sarah saw written on a vent moments before she died, her final psychic message to her sister, and that this realization is what caused Jean's abilities to grow even further, tying into the film's recurring idea that trauma and emotional stress trigger evolution, seen in Peter, Bruce, and now Jean. Jean sends out a massive psychic wave that freezes the entire city in place. Peter moves to stop her, fighting through Damage Control's forces, including the Hand, and realizes in the process that Damage Control has been developing weapons specifically designed to take him down, revealing they've had ulterior motives all along. After being beaten back initially, Peter accepts both halves of his identity, Peter and Spider-Man together, which pushes his abilities to a new level. He reaches Jean, who's holding Stryker at gunpoint, and finally lets her into his mind, showing her a memory of Aunt May shortly after she discovered his secret, May telling him he's special and shouldn't have to be alone. For the first time, John experiences someone else's feelings rather than just their thoughts, and it fundamentally shifts her outlook. Peter and John recognize each other as two people who've each lost someone and lost their place in the world because of it. When Frank Castle, still under the impression he needs to act, fires at Jean, Peter takes the bullet for her, and she uses her powers to keep him alive and stable until he's gotten to a hospital. Frank is left visibly shaken by what he's done, but relieved Peter survives. He wears the Spider-Man mask himself as Peter leaves the hospital to a crowd of adoring fans who have no idea who he actually is. The first time Peter fully sees in person how loved the hero side of him has become. The film ends with Jean on a bus, likely heading upstate, suggesting she may be on her way toward Professor Xavier and the beginnings of a school for gifted youngsters, setting up future X-Men stories in the MCU. Damage Control's slow shift from a damage mitigation agency into something closer to a mutant hunting organization is shown throughout the film, and there's a clear thread connecting its methods to future adaptations of Sentinels and anti-mutant government policy, especially with Stryker's fate left unresolved and Peter's own inhibitor technology now existing as something that could be repurposed against mutants. MJ is later shown sitting on the rooftop from No Way Home, holding a necklace that shouldn't mean anything to her current memory, a detail that hints she may eventually reconnect with parts of her past, even without her memories being restored. Earlier in the film, Peter is shown repeatedly buying flowers for Aunt May's grave. At the party, he instead brings flowers to MJ and Ned, symbolically breaking that cycle of only honoring the dead and finally reconnecting with the living. When Peter and Ned shake hands using their old signature handshake from Homecoming, Ned has a brief flicker of recognition, though it doesn't restore his memories, suggesting that some trace of their friendship still exists beneath the surface, similar to what happens with MJ. However, MJ's comments throughout the film suggest she may never fully reconcile with her past self, treating those memories as belonging to someone else entirely. This ties into the film's larger theme. Identity in the MCU's Spider-Man films has consistently been shaped by memory. Homecoming ended with May learning who he was. Far From Home ended with Mysterio exposing him publicly. No Way Home reversed that by erasing him from memory. This film builds on that pattern once again. In the post-credits scene, Ned's Spidey Tracker app tries to locate Spider-Man, but the search shows no results anywhere on Earth. The view zooms out into space, glitching in a way that resembles the multiverse transition effect seen in Into the Spider-Verse, before finally locking onto a location among the stars. This strongly suggests Peter is no longer on Earth and likely connects directly to the events of Avengers, Doomsday. There are a few theories about what this could mean. It could be a tie to Miles Morales and the wider Spider-Verse multiverse, though this seems like a longer shot given Miles hasn't been confirmed for live action yet. Another possibility is that Peter ends up on Battleworld or aboard a life raft carrying surviving heroes after a multiversal event, a scenario that could also set up Peter obtaining the black symbiote suit for the first time, echoing the original Secret Wars comic where Peter's own suit is destroyed and a black organic substance bonds to him, eventually leading into the introduction of Venom. According to plot details that have leaked around Avengers Doomsday, the film may open with a confrontation between the Fox X-Men universe and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, with Maguire and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine fighting to protect their own reality. If accurate, this raises the possibility that Ned's tracker is actually locking onto Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man on a different Earth, which would tie the glitch effects to a multiversal incursion and set up the start of Doomsday directly. It would also thematically echo this film's core idea of Spider-Man going up against an immensely powerful mutant. Overall, Brand New Day strips away a lot of the larger-than-life spectacle that defined No Way Home in favor of a more grounded, street-level story focused on identity, isolation, and the cost of power. It leans heavily into comic book history, from the visual callbacks to its core narrative structure borrowed from the real Brand New Day comic arc, while setting up a clear path toward Avengers, Doomsday, Secret Wars, a new X-Men film, and a future Venom story.